We've brought you here together today to talk about the prominence of technology in our lives and in our work. And this, of course, has been underscored during the last year and a half during the current coronavirus pandemic. Because of that, the critical importance of making sure that all people have access to technology and digital skills training. At our Goodwill, our vision is that every person has the opportunity to learn, work, and thrive in all aspects of life. And in many respects, this begins with ensuring digital equity for all. That's why we're committed to providing technology access, digital skills training, and digital navigation services to help the people of our community land a job and succeed in the 21st century workplace, no matter their field, occupation, or industry sector. The imperative for doing so has been echoed by the Washington Workforce Training and Education Coordinating Board, which recently issued a report that said, and I'm quoting, "An increasing number of jobs now call for a higher level skills and education, and workers must maintain pace with these changes or risk being left behind. Training needs to bolster workers against the tide of technological innovation in the workplace, providing them with in-demand skills for quality jobs that provide family wages, personal fulfillment, and opportunities for advancement." So kicking that off, for today's conversation, we are going to hear from three individuals about their perspectives on digital equity and skilling. And then we're going to have a panel conversation and a chance for some audience Q&A. If you have questions in the meantime, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll try to address them. But otherwise, we'll take a lot of questions at the end. So we're going to begin our conversation with Naria Santalucia, who is the General Manager of Digital Inclusion and U.S. Engagement at Microsoft Philanthropies. She's going to provide a national perspective on the topic, and I'm going to show some slides as she speaks. We are then going to hear from Katie Condit, the CEO of Workforce Central here in Pierce County, who's going to provide a regional perspective. And then very importantly, we're going to hear from James Grimsey, is a graduate of one of our Goodwill programs. Finally, we've asked our Senior Vice President of Workforce Development, Yolanda Egan's, to facilitate a panel conversation and Q&A. So with that, I'm going to get started. Naria, I'm going to show your slides in just a moment, and you can go ahead and get started as soon as I do. So let me share.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori. And while you're finding those, I'll do a little bit of space filler here for all of you. So hi, everyone. I'm Naria Santalucia. And like Lori mentioned, I lead our digital inclusion and then our U.S. community engagement work within Philanthropies. And I am a proud resident. Actually grew up in Northeast Tacoma for a part of my childhood. And Goodwills have always been a really big part of our lives. My family was income insecure when I was in high school. And so we were able to use and leverage the stores for a lot of our needs. And now I'm a number one fan and continuous donor of items. But more importantly, I also served on the board of the Seattle Goodwill, now the Evergreen Goodwill as well. So we're very excited. I'm very excited and honored to have a chance to speak today. We also, of course, partner with Goodwills around the country in various forms, including the national Goodwill offices around our workforce and education program. So again, thank you so much for having me. I am going to kind of start with this kind of broad context, and I think Katie and James and Yolanda, you'll kind of bring it home on the local context. But with that, I think one of the things that we're really focusing on is this digital equity and inclusion. And I do want to note that Microsoft, we take that broad approach to digital equity. It's not just about skilling, but we think about broadband and connectivity, as well as the skills to leverage that broadband, and then, of course, access to a device as well. So we do have three legs of that stool that we're working on. My side of the house kind of represents the skilling piece, and our main strategy in this area is called Skills for Jobs. So I think very aligned with the work of Goodwill as well. So, if you could just advance to the next slide. This goes without saying, we're living in a changed world. We have a double, kind of crisis with the economic crisis, as well as with a global pandemic, of course. And right at the beginning of COVID, our CEO Satya Nadella noted that there were more than 2 years of digital transformation that happened in just 2 months, and that digital transformation just continues to extend on. If you just click to slide 3. We did some internal analysis about a year ago, kind of, and again, so these numbers are probably even underrepresented. But we have really seen that COVID has accelerated this digitization. And at this pace, if that scale continues to happen, we believe that there is an opportunity for about 150 million new jobs by 2025 globally. So I just remember pre-pandemic, a lot of people were talking about automation and the future of work and what does that mean? That conversation, of course, is still there, but what we've really realized and what we've come to see is that this digital massive transformation has actually created more jobs, especially in cybersecurity, data analytics, and cloud software. Like almost every job now, as you know, is a tech-enabled job. So just so much opportunity there. You could just go to the next slide, actually, Lori. And one of the key kind of components here on slide 5 is really showing how the skills training that people need most is not really getting to the people who the digital skills training is not getting to the people who need it most. So those jobs that are highly at risk of being automated, those individuals are not getting the skills that they need to embrace the digital future. So again, this is kind of, in the face of all this, we've really thought together as a company, what is our responsibility? How do we need to show up as a company? How do we make sure that we, playing a role in this digital transformation story, how do we make sure that people are not left behind, that, we can actually achieve that mission that we have to help every organization and person on the planet to achieve more? So we have a couple of pillars that we very much focus on. We really focus on supporting inclusive economic opportunity. That's the pillar that I work on. We work to protect fundamental rights around the world, including democracy, including making sure that people have access to human rights and that we are really protecting that kind of baseline of the fundamental rights. We, of course, have made a lot of announcements around sustainability and our plan and our ambition to become carbon net neutral, net negative actually by 2030. And also, how do we help our companies to account for their carbon capture, to think of new ways to become more sustainable as well. And then finally, we anchor everything that we do on trust. So with that, I'm going to double click into that inclusive economic recovery. We have a multi kind of prong approach. We, the green part there, the private sector, not only ourselves, but we hope to really bring our customers to the table, our partners in the private sector. We, of course, partner with nonprofit organizations because they are trusted partners in the community. And then we leverage the public sector for scale. I think there's, that African proverb, if you go alone, you can go fast, but you don't go far. But I think there's also something to be said with if you want to go, fast, go with the private sector. If you want to go deep, go with nonprofits. And if you want to go wide, go with the government. And we think that we should do all of those things at once. So it's kind of definitely the approach that we take with our work. Really quickly, our theory of change, we have a big goal. We are hoping to actually reach 25 million people, 10 million people globally who have been excluded from the digital economy, whether that's because of gender or race or geography or political or social climate, and help them gain the skills that they need to secure a job or livelihood opportunity in the digital economy. And we do this in a couple of different ways. On slide 10, you can see our theory of change embodied. We very much think about data. How can we leverage data, especially, for example, LinkedIn and the LinkedIn economic graph, to find the skills that are most in demand. And then we think about all of the learning content that that could articulate and connect into the in-demand skills. We offer and provide certifications to signal the acquisition of that learning. And then that last mile connection to a job, how can we make sure that people are connected into networking opportunities, into job opportunities? And again, you'll see kind of our partners around the edge of the circle and all the different people that we hope that we can bring together to the table and join at the table with. And then finally, if you go to slide 11, this is going to be a kind of click into all of the skills content that we really focus on. And I know all of you, as you celebrate your 100th anniversary and think about, kind of the work of the future, just definitely would love for you to just continue to work and partner with us, especially in this digital skills space. And we have done a kind of analysis around the world about kind of our job seekers and our underserved kind of learners and what path that they're on. And we have lots of different personas that we have content for and that we're mindful of, and especially on-ramps and connecting them between each of these different paths as well. So digital literacy, those basic digital literacy skills, how do you turn on, we have content starting from how do you turn the computer on, how do you become a successful digital citizen? And so we definitely have a lot of focus on this area. And we also think a lot about the language content to make sure that it's available in multiple different localized languages around the world as well. And then secondly, moving on to learner 2, we're thinking about those tech-enabled roles. So like, how do we bring soft skills? How do we bring foundational technical skills, productivity skills? Which then kind of moves you into the next entry-level tech role. So these are the IT administrator, software developers, but how do you not only learn the hard skills associated with that, but how do you know exactly what it means to be an IT administrator? How would you know if you didn't have somebody in your network? So really content around the role itself. And then finally connecting into those kind of hard skills like Python or C# or whatever it may be in the tech role. So we really have tried to take this comprehensive approach and make sure that we can provide all of this free end-to-end through number one, a big global skills initiative that we launched last year, but then also what's coming soon is like a permanent offering with this end-to-end content. The other thing that we really focus on are the certifications. I was just speaking with somebody from Laramie County Community College in Wyoming about cybersecurity, and I just asked him, hey, what certifications do you offer your students and why are they important? And he just made this great point that certifications are the leveling of the playing field. They are kind of currency, so they're table stakes, because sometimes when we have biases that come through in hiring, or we think, oh, does that person know that or not? With a standardized certificate, it's really helpful because it can open doors and get you access and have that stamp of approval. And so we have our own Microsoft certifications that we actually work and partner with nonprofits to make sure we can provide those to our learners. And we have, as a part of our skills initiative, 13 of them that have been offered at low cost, and we'll have a kind of new approach coming soon in the future as well. I'm looking forward to chatting with Lori about that. And then lastly, we try to think about that last mile in that little circle. So how can we make sure that we can provide people that are skilled at great organizations like the Goodwill of Olympics and Rainier to really land the job in our ecosystem at Microsoft? So maybe it's not just Microsoft ourselves, but our 200,000 global partners around the world that are all hiring and that are building solutions on Microsoft products. How can we make sure that people who are skilled on the product, certified, then have a job, a place to land a job? So we just launched this new service called the Career Connector a couple of months ago, and that's been a really exciting process. So you'll see, like, our whole hope is that we have all of these components to our work: the data, the skills, the content, the certs, and then the connection to a job. And then, of course, because we are philanthropies, we do underwrite all that and enable it with grant funding that we really try to keep open and make sure that it's general operating support so that nonprofits can make decisions on behalf of their communities. So with that, I think, do I pass it back to you, Lori? And thank you again for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to hearing from and learning from the other speakers and learning from all of you as well.
Thank you so much, Naria. That was terrific. Really appreciate it. Very dynamic slides and great to get the end-to-end view of what Microsoft is doing in this work. And yeah, I heard a few things about possibly talking more in the future with us. So looking forward to that opportunity as well.
Would welcome that.
So great perspective and also connection to the employer perspective, which I know Katie will have some things to share as well. So next up, we have Katie Condit, who is the CEO of Workforce Central here in Pierce County. And Katie, would love to hear from you. So I'm just going to turn it over. I don't think I have anything to share for you. I think we're just going to go do some chatting and some talking. So over to you, Katie.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everyone. Wow, I just learned a ton. So appreciate that share, Naria. I am really excited about this conversation. It's something that is coming up more and more, especially from an equity perspective and workforce development in Pierce County. So I don't have slides to share on purpose because I think so much of this is going to be generative based on questions that you ask at the end when we're ready for that. But do want to share a couple of themes in terms of what we're noticing locally. But bear with me, I first want to ask, how many of you, and it's time to use your thumbs up emojis in Zoom, how many of you work in what you would consider a tech industry? Thumbs up emoji. Okay, great. A few of you, certainly. So the second question is, how many of you in your job use some kind of Zoom or other video conferencing? Thumbs up emoji. So that's a really obvious question, but to state what I think we are all seeing as an underlying theme is that digital literacy is not unique to specific industries. So I'm going to share a little bit of what we're seeing in the data, but then also talk about really the cross industry and occupation needs that we have in Pierce County and across the country. Of the top trending skills, when we look in the greater Pierce County metropolitan area, digital skills certainly take the lead in the data. We do see a lot of strong demand for some explicit digital skills, things like data analysis tools, Tableau, JavaScript, Agile, and many of those other top skills, depending on the technology proficiencies and employer that we're looking at. The top occupations all require some kind of fluency with process management tools, digital account and record management applications, customer relationship management solutions. And then we think it's also pretty telling that LinkedIn's top trending employers in this area are, Apple, Facebook, Amazon Web Services, all these data technology companies. What's interesting about this conversation, and we in workforce development look across industries, is there are also really industry specific technology in the trades, which may not be where we immediately go when we think about digital literacy and skills. But if we think about construction trades and different equipment that now runs on specific computer programming, we can think about manufacturing, composites, things like 3D printing that require digital literacy from maybe a different perspective than we consider it. So where we continue to focus in workforce development is reframing and rethinking where we believe that digital skills live and reframing that narrative. I think it's one thing to talk about the data and tech companies and industry, but it's not industry specific when we broaden the perspective. So, as we noted, things like video conferencing, project management tools like Trello, team communications tools like Slack and the like, map navigation for commercial drivers that now happens on your phone instead of on a printed MapQuest document, at least for most of us. If we think about the levels of marketing that every organization on this call probably does through social media, these are the kinds of skills that are required across 80% of the jobs that we see in Pierce County. And so I think really important to keep that cross-industry, cross-occupation perspective in mind. And so that's what makes these high demand skills, not just high demand industries. And I think, lastly, what's really important for us as we work with employers is there are many assumptions that are made about digital literacy and individuals, more so than in many other kind of skill sets or areas. So what's assumed a lot is that people have access to phones, know how to the point that was made, turn on a computer, use email, etc. And so these assumptions often have a lot of equity implications kind of baked into them. And if individuals don't have these tools, what often happens through the hiring process is we are hired in and then are introduced to them without much training, and so are asked to kind of side hustle to self-teach or self-learn. Again, whether it be the way the team connects through Slack or Trello or simply the email and calendaring system. And so I don't know how many of you have started a job and maybe not been familiar with some of the technology that's used, but I certainly have. And that I think is indicative of the fact that this really crosses jobs and occupations. So, we see some promising equitable practices, and I think some of those were touched on in the slides earlier that were really compelling. WorkSource and job centers, Goodwill is a leader in this. We want to continue to integrate basic digital literacy into all our workforce training curriculum. It's not a set aside, but it's really core to everything we do. We often see it as a side note. Device access already came up, and I think that's a critical component of this. And employers that are most successful in training entities that are most successful have incorporated device access into their programs. So making fewer assumptions about what we think people will be bringing in to training or jobs, and providing device access helps equal the playing field. To recruit more diverse candidate pools, employers can consider instituting a standard digital literacy orientation and onboarding for all new staff. We onboard for how to fill out your timesheet and where the restrooms are. And by the way, here are two, digital literacy platforms. Oftentimes a short introduction can go a long way. And that's an employer strategy. And I think I would say, we have some incredible college partners in the region. Certifications have come up a lot. So we can think differently about side certifications in digital skills versus baking those into education curriculum, both at the high school and college level, making digital certifications a part of, as opposed to a separate component of training within different pathways and industries. And I would lastly say we can't make assumptions about the ability for individuals to quickly learn these skills. What happens is making those assumptions about whether folks have them or don't is a barrier to employment. And so, another way to look at this from an angle that I know Goodwill is incredibly strong and supports, as do many of us, is thinking about opportunities to gain skills, those skills that may be lacking while on the job. So whether that's through supplemental wages while folks upskill in their digital literacy, tapping into internship opportunities, kind of growing your own with that digital skills pathway in mind is another approach that employers can take. I'll share, lastly, there's an incredible movement in Pierce County currently underway that is in so many ways grassroots led, with a workforce development focus around universal broadband access. And, so much of this training, ironically, for digital skills exists online. And so, as did the many incredible college and other education courses and training. And so that basic access is one of the biggest equity barriers. And it's great to see from the slides earlier that that's a broader focus as well. So I anticipate there's some really good perspective in the room. I look forward to, at the end of presentations, hearing from all of you, but that's a short snapshot of where we stand from a local workforce perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, and thank you to Naria. What you both have spoken about is what has been clear to us at Goodwill in terms of our research as we look at the community needs. There's the digital skills that are needed for certainly not just tech jobs, but not even just what I'll call office jobs. Almost all occupations now needs people need to have some comfort and facility with using technology. You can be delivering packages, you can be taking orders in a restaurant, you could be checking somebody out at a store, or any number of things. You will need to have some access to the ability to learn technology, be facile with technology. We are here at Goodwill, we think about our store employees. How do we help them learn to work with and alongside technology? So these are trends that are so critical for us to stay close to, and to make sure that our staff is prepared to teach the next level of digital skilling that is going to be required as technology evolves. The wonderful thing about technology is it's always changing, it's always improving, and we've got to keep up. And so today's conversation is really helpful in just providing sort of that regional backdrop and that national backdrop to what we're seeing here at our Goodwill and with the people that we serve. The next speaker is actually one of those folks. So one more speaker, and then we're going to move into a panel conversation and some Q&A. So our third speaker is James Grimsey, and James is a recent graduate of one of our Goodwill programs. James is actually a veteran of the US Navy, and I am going to just turn over to him to tell us a little bit about his story and his journey. So James, it's all you.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, very good. So my name is James Grimsey. I'm 67 years old now that I think about it. But a while ago here, I had a business and I had a house and all this stuff. And I kind of like my business went south on me. And when that happened, everything I owned pretty much went south on me. So I lost my business, I lost my house, and I ended up just kind of like kicking around in my truck. Didn't have any place to live, didn't have any income at all. So I just kicking around. So, but the whole time I was still thinking about going back to school because I really wanted to get back to school to learn something new. That, you know, I've always been to school since I got out of high school. So I decided to take the computer classes offered by the Goodwill. I got in kind of late because I was kind of wasn't kicking around in my truck. I was just getting internet every couple of days and stuff. So I was a little bit late getting into it. But once I got into it, you know, I called the Goodwill people and they said, yeah, no problem, we'll get you in. So it worked out. And then I got all the way through it. Right now, I'm just waiting to take my national certification test. So, and the class is the A++ class. I'm not sure exactly how they designate it, but that's what it is. And so I know quite a bit about computers, you know, but I took a class back in, I think I graduated in 1982 when I was going to school at TCC. I was going to school to class after work. And I got my associate's degree in 1982, I think it was, in computer information management systems. And like, that was back when you got taught everything, networking and everything, you know, they all lumped into one big thing. And the next year, I was in the last person, me and this other girl were the last few people in that class. They broke it all out. So you had to take like networking, administration, and that. So it was pretty different. But it was so long ago, I don't, you know, I look at stuff now and I'm like lost. So well, be a good idea to get back in this. So give me the very basics, you know, a good rounding in the very basics. I can go anywhere and do it in this. So that's where I'm at right now with my life. Got a partner. I'm just kind of trying to find something to do with my life besides just sitting at home.
Yeah, James, thank you so much. I mean, I think it's so interesting how, you know, as you say, you know, at one point you were working at Tacoma Community College and you were taking courses and got an associate's degree in a computer science field. So you actually have had expertise in technology.
Yes.
But then, you know, over time, as we said, technology continues to evolve. So keeping up with that or going back and refreshing that is a critical step for you as you step into your future.
You know, I can move from I was in the facilities department. I can move. I was a maintenance mechanic or mechanic, you know, bounced back and forth. But I ran the maintenance shop for the vehicles and stuff like that. I did the key control, and all that stuff ended up being electronics. So
right,
I kind of understand. You know, and then my boss was aware that I had a bad back. So he moved me into an office, you know, and I ended up having like 4 different offices in the basement of building 1 at TCC. One had a monster printer because I was doing all the AutoCAD drawings and stuff for all new buildings they're building in and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's just, I had a lot of work, you know, I was never bored.
Yeah, sounds like, I can't imagine.
So,
well,
and all that even, you know, that's back in 2014, you know, it was the last AutoCAD class or program I had, that's 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. So,
And that, and again, the fact that the point of technology being incorporated into mechanics and
oh yeah, and
machining,
everything.
that's,
It's
that
in
that
everything.
trend has just continued, right? And
Yes.
now, of course, your certification, as you're just about to get, is with Microsoft Azure fundamentals. So the fundamentals of working in the cloud. So it's just amazing, really,
it's
to
all
see.
new. It's, it's the same, but it's new. you
Yeah,
know?
right.
Yeah,
What's new is old and what's old is new, right?
Yeah. You gotta
And
stay
I
up
know
on
we
it,
need to oh, sorry, no, we need to get to another speaker, but our learning organization recently told me that every 6 months, they're actually on average is when developers need to learn new skills now, every 6 months. So you can
Right.
see like that just would kind of flow down to the end users probably even sooner than every 6
Exactly.
months. So
Exactly.
really great.
Exactly. Well, James, thank you for sharing your story. And
You're
we
very
are going
welcome.
to go to a Q&A now, but before I turn it over to Yawanda to ask to facilitate the panel conversation, does anybody on the call have any questions they would like us to answer before we move on to the panel discussion? If so, just raise your hand. Okay.
Okay,
That's James. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Sarah, enjoy
So,
your day.
I'm sorry. Yawanda, I'm going to turn it over to you then for some Q&A with the panel.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for being here this afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone. And so I'm actually, James, are you still there? I was actually going to start with you. I had a quick question for you if you're still there. Can you let me know? Oh, there you
Yes,
are.
I'm still there. Yes.
Oh, perfect, perfect. So first, I just want to say thank you for your service, and just make sure everyone knows that James is a Vietnam War veteran, and we are just so pleased and happy that we were able to serve and to help him with his career journey. We're talking about digital skills, basic digital literacy today, and it is very important, but it's also about the work we do about helping people on their career path in general. And so James, thank you for just speaking with us today and giving us your story. We really appreciate that. And my question for you is what advice would you give to someone who is seeking to get enrolled in a digital skills program and then actually to get through that program and get to the point of testing for a certification? What advice would you give?
There's a lot of them out there, just get the one you can get in is my advice. If you can get one that meets your needs, that's what I'd look for. I've always been a proponent of going to school. Every time somebody asks me, what should you do? Go to school, and I've always found that the best way to get a leg up in life, and get a job that I couldn't have got otherwise. So.
Right. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that insight.
Certainly. And
my next question will actually be the same question for both Katie as well as Naria. And so and this is for each of you, how do you ensure that you are truly reaching those who are furthest from opportunities, in particular communities of color? And how do you measure your success with those various approaches? And we'll start with Naria and then we'll go to Katie.
Thank you so much for that question. And if I actually could touch a little bit on the first one too, which is what we've seen definitely in our data is that when we did, for example, this kind of everybody kitchen sink, come learn content online, the engagement was very high because we reach millions and millions of people, but the completion was extremely low. So for us, what that really meant, and actually where we saw completion was highest was when they were connected with a learner, with nonprofits. So not a shameless plug, I guess, on behalf of Goodwill, is that it's actually those NGO partners that provide the wraparound services, that have the coaching and the navigating. You can't just have the content and the stuff without that support for so many learners. So I think that's a key and critical part of the story. It is so, like, we purposefully, when we rolled out the strategy, really anchored on the excluded communities language, because we wanted to make sure that it was about historical and systemic inequity. That was not because of the learner or trying to say, oh, it's your fault. Oh, if only you did. Oh, if blah, blah, blah. And so with anchoring on that language, we've tried a few different things in this last year that I think is helpful to maybe just share. And we're still in the process of learning. We launched a new open grant program called the Community Skills Grant. And we actually targeted it specifically for Black-led and Black serving workforce development and digital skilling organizations. And at first, well, actually, another design principle that was very key and critical is that we passed on the decision-making power and the program design power to members from the community as well, versus like the standard execs or whoever at Microsoft. And we did that deliberately. So we actually formed an external steering committee, and they designed the grant, and then they designed the winners, or they selected the winners as well. And then the third design principle that we really anchored on was, I was touching on it a little bit, was general operating support. The data really indicates that Black-led nonprofits and Black and brown people of color led nonprofits are significantly funded at lower rates by philanthropies and by funders than their white counterparts. And then when you talk about general operating support, which, by the way, Lori, you know this too, anybody who's run a nonprofit, general operating support is king, right? Those flexible dollars. And it's even worse if you're a BIPOC-led nonprofit. And so we really anchored on, we were talking about general operating support. We want to skill the work. We want to fund the work because we believe in you and you've had great results, but you can use that however you want. You could use it to buy devices, or you could use it to, do bus passes, or you could use it to do salaries for staff. It doesn't matter, just, so that was a really different way that we kind of did the work. And I remember at first, some of our colleagues and some of our competitors were asking us, can you actually say just Black-led, Black serving? We're like, no, we're going to ask for forgiveness versus permission. And guess what? It was fine. So I think you got to be really super crisp and clear that what target population, who you want to work on behalf of, because it's really easy when we say, oh, it's for BIPOC communities, that there are all these, that it's suddenly a bunch of, Asian males or Asian. So we need to be really clear about the data and about the goals that we want to achieve when we're working in the realm of equity. So that's kind of, I would just circle back to that point. And then we also really want to think about, that general operating support component, and also don't be the ones to design, ask the community what they want and how they want that done. Thanks for the question.
Naria. Thank you, Naria. And Katie, also, if you want to ask the question about advice to those going through courses, before moving on to the other question, please feel free if you have anything in addition you'd like to add to that as well.
Great. Yeah, I'm over here thumbs upping. I mean, everything that was just shared is in my notes. I mean, I think for us, the framing we are constantly coming back to, whether it's in training, wraparound supports, the multiple facets of programs and in our workforce development system, the question we are always asking is, does the population of individuals we are serving truly reflect that of Pierce County, and more specifically that of individuals we know face the highest barriers to meaningful and living wage employment? And that takes, as Naria alluded to, really consistent and deep dives into the data on a regular basis. We so often, in, let's just call it the service world, look at how many people were served and for how long, and cross our fingers that enough of them completed. But if we aren't thinking about demographic characteristics down to zip code, down to concentrated pockets of poverty, our Black, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Indigenous communities, if we aren't looking at that level, then we don't have the full story. So I know I'm just amplifying what you shared, Naria, but I really appreciate that. And we in Pierce County we have that data. We have individual level data for everyone who is claiming unemployment, for folks who are impacted by poverty. So it's a matter of how we use that. And then I guess I would say, often we point and say, we know the story, there are inequities. What does that mean and look like then for creating better equity within these systems? And I would echo Naria's point that we had to stop doing what I think we do often is post and pray. We post our courses or our training or our jobs online, and then we sort of say people should know where to find them and show up. So we've completely shifted our mode of community connection to meeting people where they're at and then asking what they want, not just what they need, but what they want. And then delivering on that and making sure that there's a feedback loop and follow up. And so that community, it's above community engagement. It really is community co-design. It really matters. And we haven't traditionally been good at that in workforce development. And I think that's been a lesson and something we're prioritizing and investing in. And when we're designing with the community needs to be compensated for that time that they're spending in design with us of our programs. We've learned we don't just get to go and take information and perspective around lived experience and then use that in design, but really that expertise that community members have about what they need is just as valuable, and in many cases more, as the perspective that we bring as folks who are embedded in the systems. So that's what comes up for me, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Katie. This is really, really great information and learnings about all the different ways that this can be approached, then also what's needed, particularly with communities of color and those furthest from opportunity, to really make sure that those connections are being made. So thank you very much for that insight from our panel. So now I have another question, and this is for Naria and Katie. What advice would you give to stakeholders in community, employers, community organizations, state government, on how to approach the digital equity divide? We've seen a lot of new grant opportunities coming. Katie, you mentioned the broadband benefit. There's various opportunities that are happening now in our environment, but if you could give some additional advice to stakeholders, what would that look like? And let's start with Katie and then go to Naria.
Thanks, Yolanda. You know, I would say, and keep coming back to, the advice I would give is to better understand, tap into, support, and amplify the local grassroots-led efforts that are already happening in your community. I know in Pierce County, I mean, we can sit behind our desks and think about how to access community members, but what's true is there are so many strong efforts happening on the ground that it's our job at Workforce Central to say, how do we get behind, come alongside, amplify, or support? And I think in that way, to address this access issue to digital skills and literacy, in that way, we get closer to connecting with the community. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel around community connection, co-design. It's happening. We just have to honor the leaders who are doing it now as a system organization and ask and figure out how to connect there. So it's tap into the efforts that are underway in order to create more equitable access to digital skills and literacy.
Thank you.
That's really, really well said. So plus 1,000 on what Katie said. And it is so true. And I also just want to underline and underscore the point you made, Katie, about compensating, the community for their time, because I do think, there are always, it's almost like being asked is the privilege that you get. And that is like the absolute incorrect mindset, right? That we need to truly lay value and place value on community voice, because it is true. I don't think there is a single program that has been designed in with community versus one that hasn't, that isn't going to be yielding better impact and results at the end of the day. The other thing, I think this is such a good question. And I think that it's like one of the issues is that all of our different groups are so siloed and fragmented. And I think that even within, employers, state, even within kind of the verticals themselves, it's all so fragmented. And I think we have this, our boss keeps telling us we have a once in a lifetime, this is once in your career opportunity, because the funding that's going to be available when they pass infrastructure and hopefully they'll move on some of these other big kind of programs. It is truly like we cannot miss the opportunity collectively to really land those for the communities that need them, that are the furthest from opportunity, that we do use an equity lens for it, instead of the same old people and the same old groups getting funding. And I think in order to like really do that collectively is to actually be able to anchor and have a landscape and a scan. So one of the things that we did in partnership, actually, I'm going to put it in the chat if you all haven't seen it yet, is that we worked with, or actually the National Digital Inclusion Alliance has come out with a new scorecard of the states. And we helped with, you know, inputting data and enabling this, of course. We actually thought of this because as we were going state by state talking about the skills initiative and about how, you know, you need to think about digital skills, it was like we weren't able to show like, oh, this is exactly how your state's doing against digital equity. And so with NDIA, we developed, hey, here are 6 kind of principles that we want to track and measure. Things like, do you have, you know, do you have WIOA dollars funding for training? Do you have an apprenticeship program? Do you have a digital equity plan already? Hopefully with Murray bill, we'll get that passed and everybody will have one soon. But, you know, is there a mention of digital equity in a governor's statement? We have lots of different metrics or measures that we're looking at, and you can kind of then see how different states are doing. And that has actually been a really great tool, because then one state has been saying, hey, I'm really good here and I'm not great there, or I'm better here. And it's just kind of like a nice way for us to say, this is where we believe everybody, you know, NDIA is say where we believe everybody is right now. And here's then how can we build toolkits and kind of other tools that we can then leverage to move the work forward, especially as we know there is going to be a lot of resourcing coming out. It's not that the dollars aren't there, it's that are they getting to the right place, and are we doing it in the most effective way? Great question.
Naria, thank you. I'm going to pause just a second and see if there's anybody from the audience that has any questions before we continue the panel Q&A, or anybody on the call. So you can raise your hand or just unmute. No? Okay. Well,
Hey, Lori, I've got a question.
Oh, yes, Larry.
A lot of the focus thus far has been on Pierce County, I think. But Rainier Goodwill services many counties.
Right.
So how does this extend to those other communities that we serve as well?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Larry. And that's right. We are in 15 counties, and that's one of the challenges that we have, yet one of the opportunities, with the sense that people are learning to learn virtually. We have an opportunity over the next number of years to bring our services out to further parts of the region, further from Tacoma, without building, you know, a new building or setting up some sort of physical presence. We have the opportunity through mobile access, through technology, and through partnership. So an emphasis that Yolanda and her team have is in all of our counties, who are the local partners we can work with, like Katie Condit in other regions and other nonprofit organizations? Who can we work with and partner with to say, how can we help with digital equity in your community? We can bring technology and services and support, but often it's having the local connection and local relationships that will make all the difference. And that is a big focus for us as we think about digital equity and access. We think about it from a geographical perspective. How can we do that across this broad region that we have? And I will just say, to build on what Naria said a moment ago about funding, we actually are right now finalizing an application for a grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce that is about digital navigation services across the state. But it's not just us. We are working with the other Goodwills that service the entire state of Washington. There are 5 of us, regional Goodwills. We're all working together to showcase to the state, here's how we can work together. We've got the expertise and we've got the scale, so we can reach further parts of the region for everyone who is, whether they're urban, rural, or somewhere in between. So it's a good point that it continues to be a challenge, but we're hoping that with partnering with others and with some funding from government that we can advance that. So thank you for that question, Larry. And yes, Kathy, please do send letters of support. So I'll follow up on that.
And I would just add before we move back to our questions that the workforce development team here at Goodwill of the Olympics and Rainier region is already doing a lot of what Lori has said. We have platforms that are available throughout our 15 county region. We have staff that is accessible throughout our 15 county region. And we have staff that we're going to have roving to different areas of our region. So we are really building up additional infrastructure to be able to do more and more with that. And as Lori said, a lot of this is also, as we look at our partnerships with other workforce development councils, similar to Katie's organization across the region, allows for other opportunities as well.
And not to mention the partnership with Microsoft and other technology providers. I see that Eric Phillips has his hand up. Eric, did you have a question?
Yes, I do, Lori.
Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
I guess I just, as a person of color and as a person that has a similar story as James, being a person that served in the military, and then I decided to change my career direction from the aircraft industry to IT. And it was a difficult transition. But one thing that I did not see during the time that I was going to school or any time in between is the specifics about what do entities and companies and industries like Goodwill have for people of color to show them that, yeah, you can come in and you can learn AWS cloud or Microsoft Azure cloud, and this is what we can do for you. How does a company, or I should say industry, like Goodwill reach out to the communities of color and try to introduce or try to present to them, you know, this is what we have. Are you interested? And if you're interested, this is what we can do for you.
Yep.
I really like to hear that.
Yeah, great question. Do you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Eric, for that question. So it's actually really interesting because it really dovetails nicely with what Katie and Naria were talking about. It means that we are having to develop relationships with local organizations that serve that population. And we've been doing that, particularly in Pierce County, and also as we look at our locations in other places around the state. And depending on which program you're talking about, and workforce development will depend on where we are across the 15 county region. But what we do is we partner with those organizations in order to make sure that they know what opportunities are available to them. In addition to that, we do a lot of outreach. Much of it is focused where we have physical locations, Longview, Yakima, Union Gap, Tacoma, but we're also doing more outreach in the other county areas to, again, through local organizations to make sure that they understand the scope and breadth of what Goodwill has to offer. And we find that there's always much learning around the various programs that we have, because we actually have many programs, even beyond just the digital literacy and digital navigation piece. In addition, Eric, I'll mention to you our Veteran and Military Services program, you know, particularly with both you and James, and I'm sure there's probably others on this call that come from military background and are veterans or transitioning veterans. In particular, that team does a lot of work in trying to make sure as veterans, as military members transition, and then also we can support veterans of any service era and those that their family members and those that are caregivers. And we do a lot of outreach through veteran organizations as well as on the military base to make sure that there is broad understanding of what is available to those who have served our country. And in addition to that, we have a mentorship program, which is really unique as an adult mentorship program to really mentor those that have been in the military about what it means to transition to civilian life and what it means to be able to successfully make that navigational shift. And even in that arena, working with organizations that work with transitioning military and veterans of color to ensure that that it is well known what is available to them, not just through veteran and military services, but they also do a broad overview of everything that we offer. And there's always more work to do. There's always more work to do to make sure that we are developing relationships and building that trust in communities of color as we inform and communicate and give overviews around what different programs we have available. So while we're doing some work in that area, we're also continually evolving to make sure that we're doing a better job of reaching those communities.
And what we'll do after this call, when we send around the recording of this wonderful session, we'll also include a link, or more than maybe one link, to our services. So for anybody on the call who wants to learn more, wants to share more, we will certainly do that. We've got one more hand raised, and then I'm going to go back to Yolanda for panel questions.
Can I just chime in really quickly on the previous, well, on both points too? I think one of the things, Eric,
Sure.
is like, we always feel like this, we'll often see, right, this lack of just, I mean, the skills are there, like there's the will, but there's also often like this lack of belief because they don't see a lot of people like who have made it through. And honestly, because employers like ourselves, we haven't done a great job of hiring, and saying we will hire you. There's a place for you here. So it's just something that we need to own too, because the more that story becomes not the outlier, but the norm, I think that's where, people will sign up for more programs that are, from BIPOC communities, that they'll believe that it's possible because it is. So, I mean, this just maybe Pollyanna-ish, but I do think all of us can really play a role. And Eric, you telling your story, for example, is probably a really powerful way to get others to the table too. And then on the point about like, not just Pierce County, but we do have rural programs around the US. And one of the things that I think is going to be a really positive thing from COVID is that people can work remotely now. We were just in, Southern Virginia and like South Boston, tiny town. There are like people who are getting jobs at, kind of Silicon Valley based companies doing IT admin work remotely. So it's like, how can this Goodwill really take advantage of that kind of remote motion? I think will be a really positive opportunity as well.
Thank you, Naria. That's really helpful. We've got two other folks with their hands raised. First, Amy, and then Bill. But go ahead, Amy.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me?
Yes.
My question is, I suppose I know all the organizations online have their scope of operation. However, because it's a long term, we're talking 2030. Wanting to, what we want to have as far as what are we doing to reach out to middle school? This is, as I understand, most of you probably already know this on the call, that is where we lose a lot of Black kids in that, special range. And right now, these kids, I think, are born with digital skills. Like you throw them a phone right after birth and they can use it. But this is a pivotal point where they can actually dive right into it. And I think even incorporating, like Marnia said, and so many others said, seeing at that age, other Black people that are doing that. Sometimes that piques the interest. So I want to know, like, if any of you guys have actually expanded your scope to include like this middle school age.
Thank you, Amy.
I That, Amy, you are spot on. I'm nodding so furiously. The research has just, it is so clear that middle school, like we have to be earlier than high school. And I think that's something our career and technical education programs have leaned into across at least school districts in our region. And so I can't speak for our public schools. And I know a lot of this happens in partnership with Goodwill and other similar agencies, but I would say it's early to middle, like early adopter days in that reach into middle school. But I know it's something that the superintendent level at the state is looking at funding more significantly. And again, I think then it's going to be incumbent on each of these programs to infuse digital skills into each of the pathways that crop up, whether it's in career and technical education or otherwise. But I would just say, absolutely, yes. And I think you alluded to this idea of modeling to middle school students, seeing others in these professions who look like them, who have similar lived experiences. And I know that is being prioritized more and more. And so the more advocacy around that, the better.
And Naria, I think Microsoft has programs for the middle school years. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, our kind of philanthropy activities don't extend to middle school, but of course, I think to the person who chimed in, the point that they are actually digital natives, right? A lot of them, and they know already, and they're kind of born with I don't know, my 2-year, when my youngest was was pressing things, like, why isn't this moving? So I think it's a different world for them. But because we do have Minecraft and Xbox and some of these other kind of brands that the young people are already using, that's a place where we can meet them where they are. Minecraft just extended its education office it offer to after school programs, and they, for example, have started putting in sustainability. They have an amazing racial equity kind of world that they created that you can go in and create. So I mean, I'm happy to put some of those in the chat. That's one avenue. But then as we kind of go earlier in the pipeline on the philanthropy component, we start at the high school level with our TEALS program. And that's where we go into high schools, including in many actually of for your whole region, high schools, where we go into schools that don't offer computer science and then bring in industry volunteers, hopefully that look like the community and reflect the community, and then teach the teacher how to teach computer science. And what that means is we're building the capacity of that school going forward, because we believe that if we can kind of influence them, because I totally agree with the point that it's about digital literacy and digital skills, but the most in-demand jobs, the ones that are growing, are in tech, are in computer science. So how can we, if you have an ability or want to in any way study computer science, let's make sure you have that chance at high school. And even earlier in middle schools, even better. But right for now, we haven't extended the program into the middle school yet.
No, thank you, Naria. And there's been comments in the chat about there are a number of nonprofits, certainly here in Tacoma, I'm sure in other communities too, but certainly here between Green Trike and others, there are a number of nonprofits that do focus on the younger ages, and that is super helpful and wonderful to see. And wherever possible, we can think about ways to connect with them. I want to go to Bill, had a question, and then I think we'll see if we've got time for one last panel question.
Thank you very much. My question is very quick. It's directed to Katie. And my question to Katie is simply this. As we know, technology moves at warp speed. When we talk about these issues today, tomorrow, we're going to be probably playing catch up. So given the speed of technological change and innovation, Katie, how do you go about providing the type of training in order for a digital workforce to basically to keep up, given the rapid changes that's occurring in the economy?
Thank you, Bill. Katie, did you catch that?
I think so. Thanks, Bill. I don't want to be a broken record, but I think one theme we continue to see is needing to infuse this training kind of throughout pathways so that as those shifts are occurring, it's a baked in component to whether it's workforce training that Goodwill does or we do, or to your point, be a revisited core component of curriculum across pathways. But the other thing that I'm thinking about as I hear you talk is, and we know is true, is employers have to step into this from a training perspective. It's so, we often expect individuals to be in a job, and then when they need to learn new skills, to go outside of that job to learn those skills, maybe at the same time as being employed, maybe at night, maybe on top of. But what I think we need, and we're starting to see as more employers recognizing that they have to play a role in ongoing training and upskilling that's baked into the work. So earn and learn models. And I think the more and more we can advocate for and amplify employers who are doing this, who recognize digital skills and literacy is a core thread throughout our work. And we see tech companies doing this and others who get it. And I think we'll see more adopters. But the short answer, at least from what we're learning, is that partnership employers have to step into this space as well and consider digital literacy and skills as an ongoing core component for their workforce, and then connect that training and advancement to the work, not make it something separate that people have to figure out how to learn on the side.
Right. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Bill, for that question. After the call in a day or so, we will send around resources from Microsoft and from Workforce Central and from Goodwill to cover a number of these questions, because there's been a lot of stuff put in the chat, but we'll make sure to capture that and send it around for everybody in email form as well, so that people can access and share. Yawanda, I'm going to go back to you. We've got a bit of time left. Do you want to ask another round of questions of the panel? What would you like to do next?
So actually, I am going to go back to James. Can you all hear me?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I had to plug my computer in. So we're talking about technology. You have to make sure the power to your device. Okay, so I actually want to go back to James and see if we can ask another question of James. So James, I just want to make sure you're there and can hear me. Are you there?
Yes, he's there.
Yes, James, thank you. So we've heard a lot from the panel around what some barriers are and some challenges with being able to access training that's needed. And I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience, what else you would offer to the group for us to think about around the kinds of barriers and challenges there are to being able to access digital training.
Well, access is always the key for me. Like if you don't have a house and stuff and you're living in your car or something like that, how do you check all your electronics and keep them up? You know, I mean, I finally found the inverters and that type of stuff, but those are kind of dangerous at times. So that's always a problem. That, you know, you guys gave me all sorts of places to start looking for other things to do, you know, because there's online where you find out, you know, the jobs that are out there that you can get and what you got to get to. So I use those. And you know, right now the reason I'm bouncing between, like, you know, doing the hardware part of it is just because I'm an ex-mechanic and I like that kind of stuff, you know, but also like the administration part of it. So, and I like the HTML part of it, and, you know, just like you go on and on, you know, so there's a lot of jobs out there to pick from, and it's just getting the right classes, you know, and finding, you know, so I think having a mentor or somebody, you know, that can explain to you what you got to get, you line that out exactly to get from A to B. What exactly do you have to have? You know, because if you don't have everything you need, you know, you go in and they won't, sometimes they'll let you slide a little bit as long as you take that class, you know, in the next 6 months type thing, but not always. So that's kind of like, you know, that's something. And, you know, money's a problem. Some places study's a problem. You know, if you're homeless, it's pretty tough to get anything, you know, but, you know, like I started doing this before I even got a place to live. I just said, I'll just, you know, bite the lip and just keep going on it, you know, and that's where, you know, I made it through my classes and stuff way back when, you know, I was going to school and working at night, or working during the day and going to school at night and studying the rest of the night. So it took me a while to get it done, but I got it done finally. And it was a good basis. But now, you know, everything has changed so much, you know, it's just, I look at it, I'm going, I don't know any of this stuff. I remember some of the real old stuff, but that's about it.
Thank you, James. We
Certainly.
appreciate that additional insight from you. Thank you.
And
You're
James, it's so interesting to hear your perspective, because on the one hand, it's the basics, a place to be, to connect to technology. And then on the other end of it, it's also mentoring, the personal touch. That,
Yes, I think.
so,
yes.
there's the physical barriers that have to be overcome, and then there's the personal. And so and everything in between. So that's really, really good for us to be thinking about. Thank you.
You betcha. Everybody have a good day. I'm gonna leave now. I got things I get going.
Thank you, James.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Certainly.
Okay, I do have one more question, and this has been touched on a little bit, but I actually want to go back to Naria's presentation when she talked about 150 million new jobs in 2025 that are a result of just this rapid movement along needing digital skills and credentialing and having those skill sets in order to be able to work. And so I'm actually going to combine two questions. So I had a question about that for Naria, but I want to actually tie it in so that Katie can also respond to this, because we know in Pierce County, 47% of occupations are at high risk for automation and digitizing. And so as we look at the fourth industrial revolution, which is what all of this discussion is about, from basic digital literacy and navigation to more extensive IT and technological skills, what else do we think is needed as we look out into the next 2 years, 5 years around how the community can respond in order to really equip people for a future which is rapidly changing? I know we've touched on this with some of what business can do and government can do in some existing programs, but I'm interested in kind of the glass ball, looking out into the future. And with everything rapidly changing, Naria and Katie, what else would you add as we look out at what's happening in this particular environment around digitization?
Katie, do you want to go first?
I will start. I'm sure I'll have more to add after hearing from you, but I am not, if we all haven't learned our lesson about looking into the crystal ball after the pandemic, but I'll go ahead and try and do it anyway. But I do think what's true, and this has been true for prior to the pandemic, is that there is often, and not always, but a myth around the extent to which automation is going to take jobs. I think we frame it as, and the data often plays out, that automation shifts jobs, and we have to be ready to support individuals to shift with it. And so, so much of what has been covered, and, I know Tafana just mentioned this in the chat, as well as many others, we keep saying this idea of continual learning needs to be baked in, not only with employers, but into our education and training systems. And so there's a bit of sort of a philosophical shift in how we think about training as a one and done, as opposed to as a core thread through employment. And that's the only way we're going to keep up. And so that's what comes top of mind to me. Certainly, as we've seen and will continue to see, this idea of automation taking jobs has been true for over 100 years as far as a leading narrative. And where we pivot is where we get better at baking in our conception of what it takes to kind of reskill, upskill throughout the continuum. But Naria, what would you add?
I think that's really well said. I do think that, again, there was this whole sense that automation, no more jobs, and it's just really a shift of jobs. And it's like our president, Brad Smith, he'll talk a lot about like the day that the horse lost its job. It's like this kind of story about the last fire engine that was pulled by a horse, and then retired, and a kind of motorized fire engine vehicle came to be, right? And the horse no longer had the job, but there were so many other jobs that were created based on that automation that we can't even know or see yet. And actually, there are some statistics that say that a majority of current college students work in jobs that don't even exist yet. And we are just definitely seeing those kind of the trends. For example, cybersecurity is a big one with all this digital transformation happening, and with lots of additional threats that are coming on the scene, not just on nation states, but actually to nonprofits. I know this is like a huge issue. There are way more cybersecurity at all level roles that are coming and being created. Did we know that would happen before the pandemic? Yeah, there was a little bit of a rise, but now it's just been accelerated. So again, I think that narrative that what we can do is continue to promote that it is that shift in jobs. How do we support that effort? And to that end, I think that the best skill that people should continue to grow and cultivate are not the technical ones at the end of the day, but are really those essential skills like resiliency and growth mindset and problem solving and collaboration, communication. It's the human skills that are going to be the most important as like more and more things get automated. And again, back on the shameless plug for Goodwill is like, I know what you all provide are those human skills, is that resiliency, is that kind of stick-to-itiveness and getting people through content. And that's the thing that, you can learn the content. I think most people, if you really, really try at it, you can kind of get there. But it's really those power skills, I like to call them, that I think we should all as a community focus on.
Yeah, and Nari, thank you for that. I absolutely agree. This is about digital skills and technology, but it's about also helping people generally just learn how to learn and learn how to apply what they've learned in a workplace environment. And the human skills are critical. And so that you're right, the support, the wraparound coaching and mentoring and supportive services that Goodwill and other organizations provide to help people along their journey, like James said, the mentoring, the guidance, that is what we find is what makes the difference at the end of the day. It's not, and so we care quite a lot about that, and we partner the technical skill with the human resiliency skills, creative thinking, critical thinking, communications, teamwork, collaboration. All of that is really what helps somebody not only land a job but succeed. So thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to close the call in just a minute. Yolanda, anything else from you before I do a quick wrap?
Nothing else from me other than just appreciation for each and every one of you being here today, and in particular for our panel members, Katie, Naria, and James. It's just been a phenomenal time, and just thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, and thank you, Yolanda, for the wonderful questions and facilitating the panel Q&A. And again, I will add my thanks. Thank you to Naria and Katie and James for telling your stories, for giving your perspective and your expertise and your guidance and your insights. And thank you to everybody on this phone call. This is absolutely terrific. It's great to have attention on the importance of digital equity for our community, for our region, for our state. We look forward to working with all of you to continue this conversation and to make change happen, everywhere we possibly can. So thank you as we look at powering up Goodwill and powering up our communities. We will, as I said, follow up with resources and more information in an email, so that if you didn't capture it in the chat, we'll make sure that you capture it afterward. And with that, I'm going to sign off. And again, have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today.